to be in America again. You know, woke is broke. Now you can talk like you want to talk. You can be who you want to be. You can say, I voted for Trump. I mean, we're back to being America. And it didn't take that long. It didn't take long to destroy it. Didn't take long to bring it back. And now, of course, we're setting up ourselves on the world stage to remind the world that without a strong America, spiritually, economically, socially, and militarily, the world would implode. We're getting back to being number one because our enemies do fear us now. I mean, look at, you take Russia. I mean, Putin he's not comfortable with Trump being president. Venezuela's not either. You name it. So we're getting back quickly on where we need to be. And I think America feels it, and the people are excited about it.
Leadership matters, man, and it does have such an impact so quickly. Last thing, just in terms of legislation coming up, the tight majority, the slim majority. I know everybody asked you about this, but for our listeners, y'all are still getting things done. So even with that slim majority, we've seen some really good bills get through. So how are y'all pulling that off? I mean, that's hard to hold the whole caucus together. And actually, I've had some Democrats with you on some of these bills as well. But it's just surprising. I guess, what are your thoughts on that? How y'all have been able to get things through even with that tight majority?
It's been pretty phenomenal. It's the lowest majority ever. But we have common sense bills, right? We have common sense bills that empower the people, not the government. It says, hey, we're going to have less government, not more government. And it's power to the people, if you want to say that. So we've been doing that. And of course, we just passed a budget out of the committee. Now it's got to go to the floor so we can pass the budget so the president can do really what he needs.
どれくらい待った？
またな。
あ、今終わったとこ。よかったね。今日は運動どうだった？
同じ。
チャイニーズの先生。やりやすかった。あ、チャイニーズの先生やりやすかった。やっぱり日本人と会ってんだね、そしたら。日本人と会ってんだね、やり方が。じゃあここに来るのが正解だったね、そしたら。サウナ入った？今日はたくさんいた？い
ない。
あ、空いてんのここいつも。空いてんだね。
We appreciate you. God bless you. We look forward to getting you back soon.
God bless you.
That was Congressman Roger Williams from Texas. Always good to have him on the program. And I think one of the things I'm hoping that you get a sense of when I share these interviews with you is there's a lot of people out there you may not be familiar with that are fighting the good fight and that are gaining ground, that are winning some battles. And a lot of times we get cynical, we think everybody in politics is crooked, that there's nobody that has backbone and courage and standing for truth. And so the more we have these folks on, whether they're a state legislator or in Congress or, Colonel West being a former congressman and now county chair of Dallas County, and, all these people that are on the front lines, it's just a great reminder for all of us to know that God's got an army out there, man. He's got a lot of people that have engaged in the fight and that are doing good work and winning a lot of battles. And just because we now have a president that is pushing the right things and putting the right people in place is not enough. We have to know that, there had to be a team that was raised up for him to do the things he's doing right now. All these years, all these decades of training young people, of training pastors, of training candidates, of training.
今のところ週に2回がいい、それとも月水金3回にする？
教会に1日かかるからね、これ。月金でいいよ。
火曜と金曜か月水金。
月金で行って。日曜日も教会に行って1日かかるもんだって。
私が言ってんのはエクササイズ。月水金かカーと金曜かどっちがいいかっていう。
カーと金がいい。
運動してんの？
able to till that ground. You're able to sow into other people that, whoever he's put in your life. Maybe you're a pastor out there that's frustrated because you don't feel like your church is having the impact on the community that you wanted. But if you're raising patriots in your church, if you're making disciples, if you're actually training them to obey everything that Jesus commanded,
腹減ってるかね。
言ってるよ。
the whole gospel and not just part of it, if you're actually talking about whatever's going on in the world and then talking about what the Bible says about it, I can promise you there will be fruit that comes from that. It may not be in this particular season of harvesting that's happening at the federal level. It may be 5 years from now, something that happens in your community or in your state. I think that's one of the things that we have to get better at is to think generationally, to not be a microwave culture, to not be so immediate gratification. And we want to place our order at the window and drive through in 60 seconds and get our food and move on. This is not one of those areas that works. This is an area where you've got to bake this in for years before you see the fruit. The fruit that we're seeing right now in Washington, D.C. and these executive orders and the things that Donald Trump is doing and the agencies and the leadership that's there that's joining this team, that is coming after decades of seeds being sown. I'm talking about back to Jerry Falwell and the moral majority. I'm talking about back to Don Wildman in the beginning of American Family Association. I'm talking about back to Pat Robertson and the Christian Coalition. And I'm talking about things that happened in the 80s and the 90s. And then there was a new generation that came along in the 2000s that started, taking those seeds and truly watering them and making it where that you could build on what had been planted by the previous generation. It's no different than the Pilgrims and how many generations it took to get to the real fruit. It's no different than the Founding Fathers and the fact that they fought the Revolutionary War, but it was another generation before, almost a generation before you actually had the Bill of Rights and you had the first president. And I mean, that took 20 years. Think about it, from the Boston Massacre all the way to the Bill of Rights being in the Constitution is 2 full decades. So we need to be thinking about that. We need to be enjoying this harvest we've got right now. But what are the seeds you're planting right now for the next harvest? What are you doing to sow in, to pass the torch of freedom to the next generation? Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back. You're listening to At the Core with Walker Wildman and Rick Reed.
What is DEI and why is it antithetical to truth? DEI teaches people to view themselves and others primarily through the lens of race, gender, or social status. As Christians, our call is not diversity for diversity's sake, but to proclaim Christ, calling people into unity through the power of the gospel. I'm Jenna Ellis, and you can read my article, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, a Truthful Definition, on thestand.net.
Have you wanted to take your family to Kentucky to visit the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter, but just never took the time? Don't put it off any longer. Let 2025 be the year you check that off the list. In fact, you can make it an even more memorable trip when you join AFA at the Ark October 30th and 31st. On Thursday, you'll get transportation for a tour of the Creation Museum, and Friday we'll take you for a tour of the Ark Encounter. But that's just the beginning. Expand your knowledge of creation with a special dinner presentation on Thursday by Answers in Genesis astronomer Dr. Danny Faulkner. Friday, Dr. Georgia Purdom, Answers in Genesis Vice President of Educational Content, will help you dig deeper into the Bible. And Friday evening, enjoy dinner and a panel discussion with Tony Vitagliano, Walker Wildman, and Wesley Wildman, Vice Presidents of American Family Association. Visit afa.net/events today and click on AFA at the Ark. afa.net/events and click on AFA at the Ark.
If you're 65 or older, you know this. Seeing your healthcare costs go up and up is frustrating. And maybe you were just notified that your Medicare costs are increasing again, or you're just tired of the massive deductibles. Well, here's some good news. There's a program that can really help with this. It's MediShare 65 Plus. It's an affordable, reliable alternative. You can choose any Medicare provider. You get telehealth access anytime you need it. And MediShare 65 Plus is a low-cost option for those with Medicare Parts A and B, and it fills in the gaps where Medicare stops. MediShare is a Christian healthcare community that aligns with your faith. People actually pray for you, they encourage you, and it's proven too. It's been going strong for over 30 years now. So So call now. You can get one low monthly price for up to 10 years. You're not stuck with increasing costs. You can do something about this today. Call MetaShare 65 Plus. Find out how much you can save. Call 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE. Thank you for listening to the previously recorded program. We love your participation in our shows, but due to the pre-recorded nature of this program, it will not be possible to take your phone calls today. We look forward to being back live soon. Thank you for listening to American Family Radio. At the Core podcasts are available at AFR.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
We're back on At the Core with Walker Wildman and Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Thanks for staying with me today. We got one more interview for you today, and it's actually going to pick up on what I was talking about right before the break. You know, it's essentially we're in this moment where we're seeing all these victories in Washington, D.C., and we're seeing the things that President Trump's doing. But I don't want to say it's surface level because these are huge, huge things. They're things that we've prayed for, trained for, hoped for. I mean, this is fantastic. But it is somewhat surface level from the standpoint that it gives us air cover to do the hard work back home. Also at the federal level, it's the beginning, but man, we've got to root out the rot that's in the culture big time in Washington, D.C. So I'm just saying there's a lot of work to do. And Jerry Newcomb, we're gonna talk about this, just the importance of digging deep and winning this, of actually turning this, what Roger Williams was talking about earlier, really turning this thing around and getting our fiscal house in order. Jerry Newcomb from Providence Forum, thanks for coming on, brother. Actually, by the way, thank you for doing this from NRB. You're at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, and I know things are busy and crazy there, so thanks for being willing to do that.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, great article on USAID. You know, everybody's talking about it in the waste, and we all get disgusted, but you brought it back around in your article to kind of looking at it from the founders' view and how disgusting this would have been to them. That literally violates everything they stood for.
It really does. I mean, the founders wrote specifically about, don't carry public debt. Okay, if you're going to have a situation where there's a war or something like that, maybe the government has to borrow. But during peacetime, we should not be living, beyond our means as a government. And of course, we've seen with the unbelievable waste, fraud, and abuse of the federal government that's been exposed just in the last couple of weeks. It's just mind-numbing. Honestly, Rick, to process the information that they keep coming out with is almost like trying to drink water from a fire hydrant. I know that's a cliche, but it's true. It's like, how do you keep up with all this stuff? And
no, I couldn't agree with you more, man. It's like every day, multiple times a day. That's the thing. Like if it was one big headline a day, Jerry, I think we could maybe keep up because you'd have some time to. But it's not. It's 3 or 4 times a day. There's something big getting uncovered, and it also makes me thankful that there's a good team being assembled by the Trump administration to send into each of these agencies and clean this stuff out. And they're not taking just little, chisels at it, man. They're taking a sledgehammer at it. I feel like Sam Adams has taken over. I think this is how he would have done it. Anyway,
Samuel Adams. Samuel, you know what? Lately, I've been studying a lot more, and Peter Loback and I are working on a book about Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty and the Liberty Trees. Samuel Adams deserves much more credit than he gets in modern America. And I'm not talking anything about beers. I'm talking about, what he contributed to. In fact, one author put it this way. The Declaration of Independence was the culmination of Samuel Adams' life work. And I just thought that's tremendous. And of course, the Declaration of Independence says our rights come from God. As you well know, and as as your ministry proclaims that all the time. And think about this, Rick, in that article about this fraud, waste, and abuse, and how this is so contrary to the founding fathers. One of the items listed is that the State Department spent something like $400,000 to promote atheism in Nepal. Now, wait a minute. America is, to this day, our motto is "In God We Trust," right? That's our motto. It's even on our money. And yet, money was wasted to promote atheism in some of these other countries. That just doesn't make sense. I don't even see, I can't even compute some of the waste, fraud, and abuse that's been reported, and I know the founders would not agree with this.
Yeah, and in fact, Jerry, I was just Sunday. My pastor, in his sermon, was he was sharing the 1607 covenant that talks about proclaiming at Jamestown for proclaiming the gospel, but it had a line in it about and future generations to spread the gospel to the world. So it was like even 400 years ago, the idea that we would be exporting from this continent good stuff, good stuff, the good values, and instead this administration and frankly it's been other administrations too, because it's been part of the deep state that nobody even knew was going on. We've been exporting evil instead of exporting good.
I know, it's amazing, and it even reaches absurd levels. And when you start talking about this with some people that, let's say, are more of of the people of the left, if you will, they basically deny the story. So in other words, they're blaming the messenger, not the message. And so, if you asked, okay, are you in favor of thousands of dollars being spent for transgender comic books in Peru? Well, whatever. But they're not really doing that. Well, they are. I mean, I have, that one senator from Louisiana, John Kennedy, who speaks with a Southern drawl, and he's quite humorous, but he's made that point multiple times that if you listen to the criticisms against the revelation of this waste, fraud, and abuse, they're not saying they're not coming to grips with the waste, fraud, and abuse that's being exposed. Instead, they're blaming the messenger. Oh, Elon Musk is bad, and the whiz kids are bad, and Trump is bad.
Yeah, and Jerry, you talk in the article, you quote Jefferson talking about how bad it is to saddle our nation with this debt, and it's stealing from the next generation. We're when we pass it on to them, we're basically taking from not just their inheritance, we're taking from their future earnings.
Yeah, we're stealing from them. We're stealing from my children, your children, our grandchildren. It's just awful. And, basically all the founding fathers, talked about if the country has to go into debt, if it's necessary, such as in war, then as soon as it's all over and you have peace, then stop the debt. And instead, the government has just been borrowing. And it's outrageous how much they borrowed. $36 trillion is the amount that we're in debt. So it just boggles the mind when you get down to it.
Jerry, we've been doing this about the same amount of time, several decades, and I don't know about you, but I've never seen the same appetite that we have now in the American people, to want to see this cleaned up. Usually everybody's protecting their own little fiefdoms or the program they like, or they buy the story that this is government saving us and keeping us healthy and all those things. Right now it's different. It seems like to me, people are going, oh yeah, that's ridiculous. That money shouldn't be. Yeah, slash and burn. I mean, all the polling numbers show they love what Doge is doing, and Elon and President Trump. Is that your sense as well?
Well, yes, although obviously there's a very vocal minority that is objecting to it. And I'll tell you what, Rick, if I could, there's an item that I put in my book, In the Footsteps of Giants, in a chapter about debt, and it relates to this whole subject of Doge and exposing all this waste. But the purpose of this is to let me put $1 trillion in perspective. And again, remember, we're $36 trillion in debt. This is from a scholar. He said, if I owed you $100 and said I'd pay you in 1,000,000 seconds, then I would pay you in 12 days. If I owed you $100 and said I will pay you in 1,000,000,000 seconds with a B, then I would pay you in 32 years. But if I owed you $100 and said I'll pay you in 1,000,000,000,000 seconds, when would I pay you? In 32,000 years.
Wow.
It's like what? This just boggles the mind. And this is the kind of debt we're saddling our future generations to. I appreciate the administration saying no more. We've got to stop this. Got to cut the bleeding, and then, lop off these different debts. And, even right now we're at the point where a lot of the debt that's being accumulated is to help pay off the interest on the debt. So
that's right.
It's just crazy, Rick. And I know the founders would not have approved of this at all. That government, which governs the least, governs the best, was a general philosophy they held to.
That's right. And last thing, Jerry, I know you got to run there at NRV, but it's no different than for us personally, right? If we're in debt, we have fewer. We're limited in our decisions and the things we can do, and the things we can do to help other people. It's the same for our country. When we have this much debt, we're limited in our decisions and our ability to do the things that we should be doing as a government. Does that make sense? I mean, it's like the more debt we compile, the harder it is to have a good government.
That is so true. And in fact, I think of Benjamin Franklin, one of our founding fathers, and some of the things he wrote in, Poor Richard's Almanac and so forth about, a penny saved is a penny earned. Of course, it costs 3 pennies to make 1 penny. No, forget that part. But anyway, he would often talk about how, if you want to, succeed, make sure you spend less than you make. So, if you overspend what you make, then eventually it's just all going to collapse and so forth. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that where people are having, just runaway debt on a personal level, and it's really terrible. And, and I know situations where people get caught up in this thing with the credit cards, and they're just overwhelmed. It's almost like they're drowning in debt. And you're right, it takes away options. And so as a nation, for us to go down this road, we've got to correct. And I think this is a very welcome time from this administration to start, trying to correct these things. God's word, in fact, is filled with examples where I'm thinking right now, the parable of the talents, where Jesus says, hey, I'm going to hold you accountable one day, and I don't want you to waste the money. I want you to take the resources I give you and the talents and so forth and use them, for God's glory and others' good.
Amen. Well, and it used to be that there was just a voice here or a voice there in the House or the Senate or a governor or whoever that would sound the alarm and say the things you and I are saying right now. And now it just feels like there's a chorus. There's so many more that are in the positions to actually do something about it. So it just gives me so much hope that they're making these big dramatic steps. I mean, obviously the devil's in the detail. We'll see how much they actually get done. But it feels pretty good right now, Jerry.
It does. May God help us to keep going until this thing is really, under control. Because right now it is not under control, but we're seeing major steps are being taken in the right direction.
That was Jerry Newcomb. Had a chance to interview him while he was at National Religious Broadcasters, and we played that on Wall Builder. Some of you might have heard that over the weekend on the Wall Builder show. But anyway, I just I love the fact that we're uncovering things that had been in the dark for so long. I mean, so much of this waste, and we knew there was corruption, we knew there was waste, we knew that, but we just couldn't put our finger on it too often. You couldn't see it. You couldn't, you'd hear the reports from Rand Paul and others, and they'd point out some of the wasteful spending, some of the absurd things we were doing, but we knew there was more. We knew it was worse than even what we were hearing. And when even the congressmen don't know about so much of these things, it's such an embarrassment that it happened. But man, what a glorious day now that we are uncovering it, that we're finding these things out, and that the American people are responding to this. That cannot be overemphasized right now. There was not an appetite for this kind of corruption being exposed and gotten rid of just a few years ago, I mean, you could try talking about this stuff and people would be like, I don't care. You know, it's not affecting my backyard. They couldn't make the connection that it was, in fact, causing all kinds of problems for them, or that it was taking that much more of their paycheck or whatever. They just didn't care. They didn't want to be bothered with it. Maybe in some ways we didn't want to admit that it was so bad, or we didn't want to have to deal with it. One of those kind of things you just sweep under the rug. But they would often too. I mean, a lot of people, they just didn't want to. They didn't want to address it because it also would mean that their gravy train might be affected. And what I mean by that is that almost everybody you know has some sort of program or something that they benefit from tax dollars. They benefit from being able to have some program that either is something in their community that they care about, and they get federal funding for it or whatever. I mean, just so many people are on the receiving end that there was almost this, I don't know, scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of thing, where I won't uncover yours. I won't, object to the money that's being spent on your pet project if you don't object. That has led to this out of control 37 trillion in debt, and there's just a different attitude now. I mean, people are actually, they have an appetite for change. There's a level of disgust that is just, it should have never happened in the first place. And then there's just a sense of, we're going to get to the bottom of this and we're going to turn this thing around. And I gotta admit, I think God's using some unlikely characters like Elon Musk. I mean, here's a guy that's not even a Christian yet. I believe he's on his way, man. I mean, this is a guy that calls himself a cultural Christian, but he's got a sense of justice on this thing. He actually, I believe, is part of the reason, a huge part of the reason, that everybody else has the backbone to move forward here and make these big changes. He's just driving this in a lot of ways. And then, of course, as we've talked about here on the program, Donald Trump has just been radicalized to the Constitution and to saving America, and all of the things that they did to him has caused him to have a resolve that's necessary to do these kind of things. So it's a great day in America, a great time, and we're going to keep bringing you interviews and keep bringing you people that are on the front lines that are fighting these fights. But at the same time, we're going to challenge you to look for the thing that you can take on in your community. In fact, Thursday we'll talk a little bit about that, getting the 10 Commandments and a lot of these things out there and what you can do to make that happen. Out of time for today, though. Thanks for staying with me today. I'm Rick Green. You've been listening to At the Core with Waka Waka.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association.
90.5 KTXG, Greenville, Dallas.
As a federal or state employee, you have the opportunity to support the American Family Association through the combined federal campaign by designating a monthly payroll deduction using 12037.